welcome to a new episode of ReelPR with me, Fiona Scott. I hope you're having a good week or month, year. I don't know what you're doing as you're watching this. You could have your feet up, just watching telly in the evening, browsing on your iPad or your smartphone. Could be on a train with your headphones in. Could be in your office. I hope you take some insight from today and just take from it what you need and, ditch the rest. It's all fine. Today, I'm joined by a friend of mine, Rod. He's going to introduce himself in a moment, so let's get into it.
Thank you for having me. I'm Rod Hebden. I run my own consultancy, New Elements. As part of that, I run the festival tomorrow. And also recently set up the Swindon Culture Collective, which is just kicking off now.
Right, I want to talk about that because I had a tiny weeny involvement attending the launch of that and your amazing announcement. So just explain to everyone listening, what is that? What is the Swindon Culture Collective?
Well, I guess in a nutshell, it's a 2-year project set up to support the arts and cultural sector in Swindon. That's kind of it, really. It's not about creating a shiny new thing. It's about pulling together the amazing organisations, people we already have in Swindon, sort of the gather and lift thing, really, so that in 2 years' time, we're in a better position. Swindon's always been a priority place for the Arts Council for a long time. We get less than we should do of Arts Council money. And make less noise, and that's despite the fact we've got amazing things here. So really the project is to tackle that and essentially shine a light on what Swindon has to offer, which is actually a huge amount.
Ever since I've started working in Swindon in 1991, so it goes back quite a long time, I've always been amazed at the outstanding talent we have hidden in Swindon largely, and the amazing people and the amazing stories, and the fact that there's an overall impression outside of Swindon that we're somehow a bit beige, a bit ordinary, Rod.
Yeah, I think there is that, and I don't know where that comes from really. I mean, I often think it was a kind of a northern town in the south. We sit there and do amazing stuff, but we're not, because we're not quite big enough and we're surrounded by these kind of, quite shiny towns and cities. Sometimes we get a little bit overlooked. But I mean, I've been here since 2006, and somehow when people ask about Swindon, I just chart my career, and that's not to big up me, it's just to big up what we've got here. So I came here to work for the Science Museum. So the National Science Museum London has its biggest site and most of its collections here in Swindon, right? Which a lot of people locally don't know, but nationally people don't know that there. I then worked for UKRI, which is the biggest funder. It's the government fund for all science and research across the country. That's £8 billion worth of government money. We are the hub of science innovation for the UK, and given the UK's position, we're important, significant internationally, and that's without any exaggeration. And actually, I worked in the team that became the UK Space Agency, which was launched here in Swindon. So the UK Space Agency was here. I went from there to the National Trust. So the National Trust headquarters, the biggest conservation charity in Europe, headquarters right here in Swindon. And it's just kind of, I think those just, for me, epitomise the breadth and the quality of things we have in Swindon that we kind of don't shout about enough. Those are nationally significant things, clearly. But then you start to kind of look into what's, the locally homegrown stuff, and that's equally as impressive. But a lot of it, as you say, quite unknown to locals, let alone people from further afield.
I've always tried to be a bit of an ambassador in a quiet way. I do remember one moment when our daughter was at an event in Cheltenham for arts, and they were talking about going to Bristol and going to Bath, and I said, but we've got one of the finest modern art connections in Swindon, outside of London. And I might as well have said, it's on Mars. Why don't you go and visit Mars? So I think that the collective has a really important role to play in publicising how great our town is.
Yeah, I think that is true, and it's an interesting thing because it's very deliberately. When we set up the CIC, so it's a not-for-profit organisation set up to deliver this project. So for the money to come in and go out, so it's a lot of public money, so we wanted to make sure it had the best governance in place and all that sort of thing. So that's why I set up the CIC. And we called it Swindon Culture Collective because it is a collective. It's not meant to be this top-down organisation that delivers or runs culture in Swindon. We don't need that. It's basically just a funnel to bring everyone together. Because we've got such amazing stuff to help us together shout about it. So yeah, and I think, like I said, it's not making something new. We already have this incredible cultural offer, but why don't people know about it? And it's partly because there's not been either the money or the kind of leadership to drive it forward and make it a bit more connected. And it's partly because people are just busy doing the thing they're doing. So we've been a bit guilty of being siloed in our work. And, we've got amazing NPOs, got amazing grassroots organisations that are just busy doing the quality work they do. And they haven't really had time, really, so much to go outside their walls and involve other people. It happens a bit, for sure, but I think not enough. And so people aren't aware of what everyone else is doing. And we've never got to that point where we are greater than the sum of our parts. And I think the town centre, as we know, is challenging, and there's some improvements that are happening there. But I think that doesn't give a general reflection of Swindon as this culturally amazing place. And the cultural elements and the heritage elements that we have are kind of scattered across the town, rather than kind of centrally a central focus for it. And that's across the town centre, but also wider. Richard Jefferies is a funny one, because Richard Jefferies was quoted from The Guardian as the grandfather of the environmental movement. Okay, and we have his house.
Yes, we do.
There are people who study Richard Jefferies who think he's amazing as an author, as everything he did. And until pretty recently, we used his house as storage.
Yes, we did. Because I remember going there when there was old record players from Garrett's and from those days were stored in one of the back rooms when I visited there. And you think, really?
Yeah, just sitting on the edge of this country park. And so we've just not made the most of our assets, and that's physical assets as well as intellectual assets. And so we just need to kind of change that. And there's been, again, we're not starting from scratch. There's really important and really brilliant work being done already by organisations. So this is just about helping create that kind of glue and the structures to help them to collaborate and communicate better and coordinate better what they're doing. So together we can shout more. It's about shouting about what we have as opposed to creating something else.
I do wonder, Rod, I mean, this might be pie in the sky, but because I come from a northern town near Bath, a little town called Radstock, which is very working class and very aligned to Swindon. My dad and my grandfathers and great-grandfathers were coal miners. I do wonder if it's a historical legacy that has come through being very working class, being very industrial. People were head down, living hand to mouth, being very busy. And you didn't get that layer of almost visionaries or leaders at the top historically. So that you might have got, say, in Bath or Bristol or Cheltenham, where there was, I don't know, there was a greater level of affluence. Maybe I'm making that up, but I've always got that feeling.
Yeah, I think there's a bit of the working class thing. So a bit self-deprecating. We kind of just take for granted what we've got and just get on with it, as opposed to kind of we haven't had many local sort of big benefactors, donors who've set up grand museums or grand things which showcase what we've got. And it's a bit. I mean, if I gave you a present and I just kind of came up and just gave you a thing, you go, well, that's great. But what you do when you give people a present is you wrap it up, don't you? Yeah. And in a bow and make it look nice, because you kind of make a fuss of it. And I think we've just never made a fuss of what we've got.
So good.
We've got this amazing
right.
collection sitting in a dull building that was a temporary accommodation for it. We've got Richard Jefferies' thing just sitting there being used as storage. The Science Museum has been there, but not accessible to the public. So I think we've just not made a fuss of what we've got. And even the railway village, again, it's been allowed to decline. The mechanics is closed. And these are amazing things, which I think if they'd been in another town, if the mechanics was in Bath, for example, a lot of money had been spent on it previously. It would have been looked after better. And I think we've allowed these things just kind of go by the wayside as we've been a bit sort of future focused and thinking about industry and the economy, and less kind of shouting about the culture that binds it all together. I mean, that's not to say people aren't proud of Swindon. Local people is kind of weird thing where they're proud of where they're from, but they'll also really talk down about it, because they just kind of, it's a bit like, I don't know, you're allowed to talk bad about your own family, but no one else is.
Yes.
We talk bad about our own family in Swindon, and we need to do more about shouting how great they are and what their achievements are.
Yeah, and showcasing people and how wonderful they are, whether it's a little thing they've done in their street or their community, or whether it's a bigger thing for the whole town. Tell me a bit about, because one other thing I've really admired about you seem to be a strong believer in bringing together the arts and science. That it's not all about the science, it's not all about the arts, it's about the two working together. And that has been your career, in fact.
Yeah,
bringing those two together.
It is in a lot of ways. I mean, so I did a science degree. I kind of A-levels, I did sciences. My English teachers were really angry about it. They kept pushing books at me to read while I was doing my science at the A levels because they're upset I wasn't doing the arts. And I mostly did it because I found sciences easy because it's just a natural aptitude to the sciences. I got to the end of it. I was kind of slightly pushed into do medicine. You're academic, go and do medicine. And so I applied for that. Didn't work hard enough. Didn't get in. Ended up going and doing physics degree. Not because I was interested in physics, but because I found it kind of easy. And because there was a year in France involved, which sounded fun.
Can I just interrupt here and say, physics, my report on physics was just disgraceful, just so you know.
I mean, it was bizarre because it wasn't something I had a huge interest in, but it was something I found came relatively naturally around. Basically, I discovered that I could know 2 equations and use those to answer any question in an A-level exam because you just work from there and build out on it. You didn't have to know much, and so university kind of did the same. The year in France was amazing. Doing physics in quantum mechanics in French, I wouldn't wish on anyone, but it was a fun year, right?
No, you say that like it's obvious. That's not my idea of a fun year.
But all the stuff around it was fun. But I kind of went from there. What should I do with it? And I didn't want to kind of go the natural routes, go and be an accountant with my physics numerate degree. I ended up going and doing an engineering PhD again, because thinking, well, at least there's a job in that. That kind of feels like a thing. Automotive engineering. I was so not interested in cars, and it was deeply mathematical, too much. And so, but I was interested in communicating. And so, I did like a presentation for, a project in my degree, and they're like, actually, can we do that again and film it and use it as a case study? Because it was the bit I'd enjoyed and my writing I'd enjoyed. So I did a degree in science communication, a master's, and so I was back in humanities doing the history of science, the sociology of science, science in the media, and so found myself back in the humanities a bit. Went from there, did a bit of freelance and had a couple of bits pieces. Went to Hampshire museums to do education in science, and then to Swindon to work for the Science Museum. And actually, whilst clearly that's science, you're in a museum. Actually, you're arts and cultural sector, and it's not about the science; it's about the communication of the science. And that's where I started to, and in the Psychom Masters, really kind of look at that intersect between science and the arts and how they kind of talk to each other, and in good ways and bad ways. There's a lot of science and art projects which are awful, but actually bringing them together makes a lot of sense. And to me, they're just different ways of exploring the world, different ways of being creative. And I always get really frustrated when they say either you're kind of you're numerate and you're methodical and you're logical, therefore you do science, or you're creative and you do the arts. Scientists are the most creative people you will ever meet. They're exploring things and thinking about things no one's thought about before. Their imaginations have to be kind of pretty vast to come up with the new stuff and test it, and they have to be open to everything new. And I think the big challenge where we go wrong is a lot about how we teach it and how we think about it throughout school, and how we assess it. I upset some people when I gave a talk recently where I deliberately, tongue in cheek, spun them a bit of a line really for a while, and I suggested that science, we should treat art as importantly with as much reverence as we treat science, and everyone, yeah, absolutely agree with that. And then I went on to describe an education in arts where you're not allowed to do any art. As a child, you can't do art yourself because you don't understand it yet. You can learn about art that other people have done. In primary school, you can learn about art up to kind of maybe, sort of maybe the Renaissance, and then secondary school, you can learn more modern art. And eventually, once you've done a degree in art, only then are you allowed to hold a paintbrush and do your own art, because now you know what you're doing. And obviously, throughout this, they started off, my friends, and by the end, they were very angry and wanted to start challenging. And my point is, in science, that's what we do. You do not do any science really in school. And I don't feel like I did any science even in university. All I did was learn about the science other people have done.
Yeah.
And even when you're doing practical science in school and university, you're recreating practical experiments that other people have done. And if you get the wrong answer, you've done it wrong. And that's just not how science works. Where's the curiosity and exploration? And you keep doing it till you got the answer that somebody historically got. And it's only when you've done that and you're suddenly doing your PhD and you're going, okay, now I've got to tackle something new and do something that no one has done before. that's when you're finally doing science, and that's when you're being
I think that
creative.
happens in the arts too, though, Rod, because, yeah, you can do creative writing, you can write your own poetry. But one of my children recently did an audition and she wrote her own monologue for it, which was very funny, but they didn't want original.
Right.
She had to use somebody else's monologue, which she did, and it was okay, but it wasn't hers. She wasn't invested in it, and it was hard to understand. And I remember thinking, I thought you wanted original talent,
Yeah.
but you're assessing someone on delivering something that somebody else has created. What gives you the right to assess? So I think it happens both sides.
Yeah, it
with
can
that.
do. I think it's kind of at what point and to what degree and to what end do we let people be creative and just have an open-ended questions. And I think we cram so much into our science syllabuses, we just don't allow for any of that. And so yeah, there's clearly a, it's not black and white, but yeah, I mean, kids, before they can put a paintbrush in hand, they can paint with their fingers and potatoes. We allow them to be creative. In science, we don't really allow a lot of creativity, and I think, and I don't want to paint too much of a black and white picture. You see in primary schools they have a bit more space, and they can do a bit more of this. And you see them trying to give them questions and let them be a bit more creative, and I think they're coming on a huge amount in that sense, but they're still quite prescribed. And secondary school, the syllabus is just so tight. There's not much time for it. And teachers do an amazing job,
Yes, they do.
but they're in incredibly constrained structure for teaching and assessment. So yeah, I think bringing them together makes a lot of sense. And what I really don't like when people bring them together is this idea of they think that there's a bit of a science is hard, difficult to understand, you have to be really clever. So we'll take art and we'll make it easy. And it's almost like a dumbing down of science through art. And I think that's, again, the wrong way to look at it. I mean, science is accessible to anyone when you start thinking about concepts. Anyone can ask the question of why is the sky blue? Or, how long will the universe last? And can I look at the stars? And scientific questions are really accessible. But there's clearly detail and you can go really deep. Art is the same. Art can be really accessible, but it can also be really, really hard.
Yeah.
There's a lot of art that I go and look at and say, I do not understand it, and it leaves me cold. I just don't know what I'm looking at, right? Art is not easier than science. Science is not harder. They both have a different sort of ways of getting in, different ways of approaching, but they are both things. You can go deep or you can go shallow, and you access in different ways. So what I like to do is, I mean, the festival tomorrow when I set up, I very deliberately did not call it a science festival because I didn't want it to be for people who are already interested in science. I want anyone to be able to ask about, I'm interested in vaccines, I'm interested in climate change, I'm interested in, what the future looks like, in my health. A lot of the topics we cover, they've got science in them, but people don't think about them as science generally in their day-to-day life. And so really what we want to explore is the world, and we'll approach it with scientific approaches, we'll approach it with artistic approaches, and we'll approach those things together. And it just allows everyone to kind of play in the same space.
Well, talk about how that started then, because I did come along the first year and had a go, and I liked the fact that it was interactive. It felt no pressured, it felt fun, because I don't often associate being in the world of the arts, science as being fun.
Yeah, I know. And why should you? I mean, I didn't enjoy science, and I did it at degree level. I think I only started to enjoy science after I read a Bill Bryson book, Short History of Nearly Everything. That is what turned me on to science. And I think I had a degree by then in science, but I was not interested in it yet. And so that's kind of the change I want to make, really. And in Swindon, we have a particular challenge, in that we have a university here. So there's not much access to we don't really experience kind of researchers and scientists locally very much. And I find with my kids, you have to expose them to stuff to get them to be interested in. My eldest, very, very musical. I knew from a young age, just from hearing him sing, he was the only kid who was in tune, in primary school. He just got it. And I knew he was musical. I got him guitar lessons. He paid no attention, did not practice, was not interested. Later as a teen, when I worked at Cheltenham, I got him a VIP pass to the jazz festival, took him into a concert, and a Jamie Cullum concert, and he just loved it. And he came out absolutely buzzing, went home, went online, taught himself to read music, taught himself to play keyboard, taught himself guitar, bass, drums. He just taught himself music. And that's because you exposed him to it and it excited him. And I think in Swindon, because of the lack of higher education, we don't get to expose our young people to a lot of things that you can do a bit more easily in other towns and cities. And so for me, really, getting real scientists, real engineers, and real, creatives here, so people can just kind of interact and see what they really do and what they're really interested in. Suddenly it becomes exciting.
He didn't feel it, did it? When you bought him those guitar lessons, he didn't feel it.
No, not at all.
But when he saw someone who he could be like, Jamie
yeah.
Cullen doing that thing, he felt it.
Yeah, absolutely.
And when he felt it, he took action.
Yeah, I mean, equally, he did French in school, was not interested, but taught himself Spanish and Japanese because he could just go and do it and follow his. And I think people follow what sparks excitement, interest in them, and so I don't want to create a festival which is entertaining people with science who already like science. I started off wanting to go, here's a thing for everyone, and clearly there's a lot of science in there, but not just science and not just for scientists. And I was also aware that, we are the home of, UK Research and Innovation, and they have the different research councils that, yes, they've got engineering, physical sciences, they've got the kind of deep physicsy stuff, but they've got medicine, they've got Economic and Social Research Council, they've got the Arts and Humanities Research Council, and there's research across all of that, and let's just kind of bring that all together. I mean, someone once said, where is the creativity? Quite early days. And I said, well, you've just seen something about space, but you saw it in a planetarium with music and visual effects and a narration that was all creative. Actually, you almost can't see the division between it a lot of the times in what we do. So yeah, it kind of, I think it just spans naturally, and you shouldn't have to force it.
But also, if you look back through history, because I love history, some of the greatest ever scientific minds were great artists. I think of Einstein and what he says about imagination, and if you think of Da Vinci, just two, they weren't one thing or the other. They were often a mix of lots of things.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting, actually. I've been, I would never compare myself to any of those people. I wasn't a great scientist, and I'm not great at art, right? But, actually, I interact with both. And I did a project a while back with the Museum and Art Gallery, and people knew me as this arts person, and it was really interesting because I'd always been seen as the science guy, and now I just straddle both, and it's I think it just feels like the most rewarding space, and Swindon's in a really good place to kind of do that because we are the hub for all this amazing art, and we are the hub for this actually UK leading research and innovation, and we should be able to bring it all together. So I think. And we can do it well. I think we need to make sure we're not doing it in a way which is just, tokenistic or dumbing down. We have some pretty impenetrable art, some of the stuff we do, as well as some impenetrable science. But, some people love both those ends, and you're kind of programming for everyone. And there's ways that people will get engaged and excited and enjoyed every single bit of it, whether you just want to skim on the surface or you want to go deep into, some of the sort of deeper areas.
What should we be looking out for if we are Swindon-based or Wiltshire-based in 2026? So there's some key moments.
From my perspective, obviously we've got the festival coming up in February, and it's a funny thing because the Swindon Culture Collective work that we've been doing in the last year or so, bringing that network together, starting to work together. We put in the bid in December, last December, and worked through that for the EUI was December. We kind of put the final bid in a little bit later. It meant that we started working even more than previously with lots of community groups and artists and different organisations. And that meant that in February this last year, our numbers doubled. We went from 23,000 people to 47,000 people because we just had so many different organisations involved. And we're hoping to grow that and build on that this year in February, where we've got Living the Future as our theme. So we'll cover everything, but we're leaning into a little bit more health and well-being, and lots of stuff interesting stuff on neuroscience. Some beautiful, beautiful artworks on neuroscience actually as part of that. And so that be in February. And we're also hoping to launch a new, more national piece with the Science Museum group too. So, but that's still to work through. And then, with the Culture Collective, we're starting to look at one of the work streams is around Festival Town. So Swindon does have not just the festival. Tomorrow it has things like the Literature Festival. It's been going for 35
a long time.
years
I remember when it first started. So it was a long time, yeah.
And it's, it's amazing, and the quality is incredible. So we've got that going on. We've got the new Signal Festival, which had a couple of years, and we've got these kind of quite a range of quite established festivals in the town. But in the past, again, they've not all talked to each other. They've got different audiences, different approaches, and we think that by working together, so we've got a group of them now together working ways. Can we share best practice? Can we share kit? Can we commission artists and organisations to do something that spans across all the festivals? Can we shout about what each other do and partner up in a way which just lifts all of the festivals and creates not homogeneity, but a sense that if you're looking at Swindon, there's stuff going on all the time of quality and of breadth. And so actually, hopefully, this will be year one, but you'll start to see bits of that where you go, oh look, there's some science stuff going on at Literature Festival. There's bits of this popping up there, in a much more kind of joined up way.
Oh well, PR tip for you. I'll soon be getting national journalists asking me for festival guides for 2026. You need to let me know, Rod.
Okay.
When these things are on, so that I can get in early and say, and that's what gets the national journalists coming.
Yeah.
Getting them in advance.
Yes, and I think
that's the thing.
It is, and the way and the challenges that the festivals have always had, and I think we're making progress, is because they're all small organisations and funding dependent. Quite often, the funding arrives relatively late, so your certainty is quite late, so your programme is quite late, and then the time you get to sort of market and PR them, you're almost up on the festival. So getting it early has always been a real challenge. And so what we've been doing the Festival Tomorrow is kind of keep working with partners to go, can we have multi-year support? Can we get this? And we're making progress, and it's getting easier. But it's something that all festivals struggle with. But the dates are kind of there in the calendar, and we need, as part of that group, we want to create that calendar so we can say to people, here it is. One of the other work streams is around profile and identity. So again, that's really about, Festival Town work stream is about doing the work at those festivals. Profile identity is about the shouting about it. And what is that brand of Swindon as a festival town? How are we going to talk about ourselves? How are we going to present ourselves? And which audiences, understanding our audiences locally and nationally. So that work is just going to be starting. So there's a few things that are going on. Alongside it, we've got work streamer on progression pathways. So one of the challenges you'll get, and probably similar to the Cheltenham conversation, even locally, if you say, I'm interested in the arts in this way, whether it's dance or it's photography or film or theatre, people will say, okay, but to do that, I need to go to Bath or I need to go to London to train. And a lot of the time, that's just not true. We have amazing providers here who can train you in all these different arts disciplines, but people aren't aware of them. So they either go, okay, I'm going to move. And so we lose creative people to other places, or we have creative people who go, I can't do that, because they can't leave the town. And so they just give up on their creativity. And so this one is really about particularly young people, but not just young people, mapping out all those opportunities and where they are and supporting people to kind of take advantage of them so that we don't lose that creativity in Swindon, we can actually grow it. So that's the big one. And the other work stream is around creative spaces. So, we struggle for spaces for creativity. So artists struggle for workshops, for galleries to show off their work. We struggle for rehearsal spaces, for spaces to display all the arts that we do, performance spaces. But meanwhile, we know there are spaces in town which are empty retail units or just public spaces, stuff all over the place, which we could activate. And it's quite hard if you're an artist to do that. But as an intermediary, if we can kind of maybe take on the lease of a retail space, put some money into kind of doing it up a little bit, cover their insurance, we can then give a platform to all these artists and performers to do more in our town and make them more visible. And then maybe link them up with the festivals and maybe shout about them some more, and then maybe develop some producers through the process and give them the skills by putting them in those projects. So all these work streams link up, and it's a bit of a horrendous jigsaw. But hopefully, what you won't see is one-off, wow, that was amazing. Hopefully you'll see lots of those. But what hopefully you'll see is lots of times where things are just feeling much more joined up and opportunities being captured, which we weren't able to capture before.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that. But I'm going to talk to you about something else, and that is politics, which we don't normally cover, Rod. So like readers and people watching this, they won't know that the last few years you have taken a political stance. So talk to us about that.
Yeah, I mean, I've I've kind of been kind of political small p for a long time, I guess, engaged. Um, not from a young age. Certainly, I think my elder brother was much more. He's kind of an argumentative chap, and so he was always much more forceful. But yeah, I think I started to get more and more engaged, and things like Brexit gets you more engaged. Things like the climate crisis get you more engaged, and just seeing inequality gets you more engaged. And as I've got older, I've been more aware of that. As a parent, you become more aware of that, and about making sure you're kind of driving for a kind of better future, right? And so, probably about 11 years ago, I joined the Green Party with my ex-partner. We both joined and then went to a Green Party meeting, and she ended up representing the Green Party general election immediately afterwards, which is kind of brave. And I've represented the Green Party in local elections, so I've stood whenever, pretty much every local election, I think, since then. And in the last general election, I stood for South Swindon, which was quite an experience. And it's a funny thing because I have been approached by other parties saying, why are you wasting time? The Green Party, we've traditionally got quite a small vote share in Swindon. Come and stand for us. We'll get you elected. And I've gone, no, because I'm not in this to get elected. I kind of getting elected in many ways isn't the point. It's about having, standing for values I believe in. Right? I don't want to win an election on values I don't stand for. I want to be able to talk about what I care about. And so last year they needed someone to stand in the general election for the Greens, and I was like, well, yeah, we need someone to be in those debates. Someone, when the media do interviews of all the candidates, so we need a Green voice that talks about the environment, but also inequality and economics from a more socially and sustainable perspective. So I think that you're. I think we had an incumbent Conservative MP, we had a Labour MP with a lot of experience who'd been working hard in the constituency for 2 years non-stop, and the general election gets called, you've got 6 weeks notice. So you're starting behind, and I've got a day job and kids. So you spend the first week or two doing paperwork, and then you get your media stuff set up, and then almost the election comes before you've really managed to look up. But in it, I at one point I had to I didn't have to. I was invited to represent the Greens for the whole of Wiltshire on a debate, which was it was live online, it was live on the radio, and then it was recorded for iPlayer. So it felt pretty high stakes, and there's representatives from all the major parties there, including Danny Kruger, who was sitting Conservative MP. It was a baptism of fire, but it was great. And yeah, Danny Kruger said to me at the end, he said to Labour and Liberal Democrats, I agree with a lot of what you said. And then he looked at me and said, I didn't agree with anything you said, but you said it very well.
Oh, well.
And I thought, well, that's perfect, because
Yes.
I agreed with nothing you said. So
Absolutely. And,
I'm quite happy to take a counter view.
Yes. And, the fact that he's defected to Reform says all we need to know, frankly, and I don't care about putting that out on the podcast. But as a journalist, I've spent a long time not being political and being very impartial, which has led me to interview politicians, mostly local, to be fair, of all different ilks over the years. But like you, when I was asked to campaign for an independent candidate in one very local election, it was really interesting to see it from the other side. All the machinations that go on behind the scenes was quite, in most cases, frankly, not always great, to be honest. So I admire anyone for standing up and dealing with that. And I, too, don't regret standing to support someone who wanted to stand as an independent. Because like you, I had you're going to split the vote, you shouldn't be doing this, all of that mantra. But for me, this was about choice and saying to people, there is another choice. This guy is offering you another choice. You were offering another choice. And the splitting and all that tactical voting thing was less relevant to me.
Yeah, and I understand why people do tactically vote, but we shouldn't be forced into this two-party thing where you have to always vote for the least worst option.
You're
and
quite
that's the
right.
thing. Most people are doing that. They're not voting for a party they like. They're voting for the party they like more than the one they really hate.
Yes.
They're voting to keep one out, not to get one in. And we've done that for so long, and we've just ended up with a mediocrity.
Yeah.
And parties that no one agrees with. And this two-party system, how it's happened is, you can debate, whether you like it, but actually the splintering of that is really good for us in democracy. And we've suffered particularly with the Green Party, and particularly in Swindon, because it's such a bellwether, but such a kind of goes back and
Swing.
forth. It
Swing,
does
isn't
swing,
it?
and so on the doorstep, Labour people would tell me all the time. Number one thing on the doorstep was people would say, "Oh, we like Greens, but we're going to vote for you because we don't want the others to get in." And so we've always had a lot of Green support, but not a lot of Green votes because of the tactical voting. And people just haven't felt confident to put their vote for the Greens because of the fear of what might happen. And that's changing now. And I think with Zach Polanski being such a great communicator, and the fact that Labour and Conservatives are in such a mess now, and so kind of disliked even by their own supporters, it's kind of opened up people to go, actually, we don't have to put up with this anymore. We can vote for other things. And so, the Green Party membership is just soaring. We've obviously just with more members now, the Conservative Party. We have more new members than Liberal Democrats have overall. And we're like that. We're kind of chasing up on Labour. And locally, we've doubled in membership since January. We announced our first councillor just last week. It was obviously a defection from Labour, because there's just a lot of people who are disillusioned with the Labour Party who don't feel like they represent them anymore. Their values haven't changed, but Labour kind of have moved. And we get a lot of Conservative voters who come to us too.
I just think, I made the mistake of voting tactically. We did discuss in our family voting Green. But the thing that I realise is that we have to do something different. We have to do something different, or we're just going to get more the same with a slightly different shade of colour.
Yeah. And I think we've been dragged more and more. Our debates have been dragged more and more to places we don't want them to be. We've let other people dictate what the debate is, what we're talking about. And that's meant that we've stopped talking about things we do care about. And I think what Zach is doing very well is saying, no, I'm not going to play with that. I'm not going to get into that space. I'm not going to compete for that. Actually, I'm going to talk about what we do care about. And he said it forcefully. He said it clearly. He doesn't mince his words. He gets straight answers out of him, and people just seem to be really resonating with that and loving it. So it's great to see that happening. And I always say to people, vote for who you want to vote for, but vote for who you want to vote for. Don't feel forced to vote for someone you don't believe in.
I think the moment for me was actually not in anything where I had any entitlement to vote, but the whole Donald Trump thing in America, where Trump got in, I think, based upon the people that didn't bother to vote.
Right.
Where if that had gone differently, it would have been a lot done. Even though that doesn't directly affect me or my family, my children felt it affected them. And I think that's a younger generation thing. They've got more of a global view than my generation had. I mean, you're younger than me, Rod. I mean, do you think your kids have more of a global view than you?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, they and COVID made a difference too. I mean, my youngest, he just started secondary, hadn't been there very long, and he was a new secondary. He didn't have any friends in that, from his primary school, and quite quickly it got pushed online, and so he was spending a lot of his time socialising online. So they do obviously on multiplayer online games, and his accent got quite bizarre because he was just interacting with people from all over the world, and they were like discussing things with people, and it just the perspective he got from that was kind of really really interesting. And I won't do impressions of his accent, but it was quite we did mock him a little bit. Fair play to him. But they do just see the world quite differently, and I think things that have gone in things that are going on with climate change, things that are going in America, it's a lot of them, have the hope stamped out of them by this, and people blame social media and phones. I think yes, they play a part, but actually our politics has played a huge part. Back in my parents' day, it was all the future's bright and exciting, and technology is going to solve things, and we've come from war to now we're going into a beautiful future, right? What they've seen is they've grown up in a time where people talk about how great it used to be and how it's now all declining, and the future is looking pretty scary. So of course they're going to have some mental health issues. Frankly, it's a healthy response to the situation they found themselves in many ways. It's a rational response. But actually, there's still so much positive out there, and so much more we can do. And I think what we always have to kind of make sure we're doing the right thing of being honest about the challenges, but also being honest about the possibilities, because you can overwhelm people with the kind of the scary stuff, and there's always going to be scary stuff. there's also amazing things. Yeah, I would not want to live now in the 1950s because there's
No.
so many other bad things. And you can look at it with rose-tinted spectacles and look at the great things, but actually we've come on in many other ways.
I have always hated those
immensely.
posts on social media that say, look back to the 1970s, we did this, and this. And I always think, yeah, and, you know, we had candles and power cuts and, you know, we didn't have cars.
No.
We couldn't afford things. We didn't have supermarkets. We didn't have choice. And, no, I don't want to go back to that.
Yeah, and people, the social issues as well. People worry about, the whole woke thing, this stuff. Well, go back to the 1950s. Domestic abuse was perfectly understandable and accepted. We were able to do that. There's all sorts of things about social behaviours and attitudes that we definitely know if you went round and spoke to people, they wouldn't want to go back to that. These are hard-won battles for improvement in society. And we don't want to go back there at all. And yes, there's wonderful things and rose-tinted stuff, but that's not where we want to be. And also, there's that thing of a lot of the challenges we have now are because of the things we did then. Partly because we didn't know, but partly because we just didn't look that far in the future. We hoped future technologies would save us. We talk about climate change, but also just as big, if not bigger, as a challenge is biodiversity loss. And we've allowed the way we do agriculture and the way we do industry to denude and take away our countryside. And actually, we were only just going, actually, turns out we really need nature. We actually rely on it. We rely on it health-wise, mental health-wise, economically, we rely on it. And we're kind of losing that rapidly. And we're getting, so planning reforms is another challenge at the moment that we're kind of to sweep away all the things that got in the way of house building. We're actually sweeping away now a lot of the things that keep us alive. We're going to have vastly more flooding. We're having uninsurable areas where, where people are building houses. You can't replace that. You can't cut down an ancient forest and replace it with a new forest because the ecology now is taken away. You've made an entirely inert, neutral, sterile space. And nature just doesn't work like that. So I think we need to capture, we know much more now. We're able to do much more positive things now and grasp onto those. There's a lot of agency that young people have and we have. What we shouldn't do, and I one of the things I get very angry about is when people go, kids of the future, teach them about the environment, climate change. Like, they already know.
Oh, they do.
They already know. They already know the mess we've left for them.
Yes.
It's the adults we need to kind of engage with it.
Yeah.
And we've, I think with the climate denial, mostly we've got from, it's not real. Mostly we've now gone, okay, it is real, we accept it. But then there's a bit of it wasn't man-made. We've kind of got through that wasn't man-made. Now we've gone, okay, it's real, it's man-made. Now there's nothing we can do, either because we're too small as a country or because it's too big or too expensive. It's not true. Those are lies we tell ourselves, convince ourselves to just keep going the way we're going and stop ourselves from challenge the systems and the and the polluters that are there.
We're a great believer in small incremental changes because if we all make them, it encourages others around us to make them, and that creates an ever-increasing circle.
It does. And but I think we need to also go, we won't fix these problems with individual changes. Individual changes apply pressure on government, on other companies. Actually, we need systemic change, which we can't do individually. And I think one of the things that the big oil companies and the big polluters have done is with things like carbon footprinting, all this stuff, they've shifted the responsibility back to us and said, well, pollution happens because you buy it. It's a consumer choice.
Yes. It was on the telly yesterday, that very thing.
If only you bought things differently. Look, here's a more expensive eco version compared to your convenient cheap version. It's because you're selfish, you don't buy the expensive one. It's your fault. And that's simply not the case. It's not the fault of individuals. They're at this point, you've kind of put them down the chain and they're making tiny consumer choices. And at the end of the day, consumer choice is just about buying more, right? And actually, a lot of the time, we need to buy less or do differently. The whole reuse, recycle, reduce stuff. So we need to make changes ourselves, sure. But actually, a bigger thing is making sure our governments are working differently and the companies who are lobbying our governments have to work differently. And I think a big thing that Zach's doing is like pushing back, saying, he says, He's a vegan, he doesn't fly, he doesn't drive, and he does that to just push away the people calling him a hypocrite, right? But actually, what really needs to happen is we need to change behaviour of government and big business. That's where we'll make the big differences.
And thank you for that political. That's really good.
I didn't know you were going to talk to me about
Oh,
politics.
no, it's fine, Rod. It's fine, it's fine. So, how can people find you if they want to find out more about you? How can they find you?
Wow. I mean, many ways. I wear so many hats. Clearly, I'm fairly active on LinkedIn. If people are on LinkedIn, the Swindon Culture Collective has a holding page. You can come there. If you go on Festival tomorrow and click contact us, that all comes to me.
Marvellous.
There are many ways you can find me on
Three is
online.
fine. 3 is fine, Rod. Thank you so much. It's really nice talking to you, and I'm sure
me.
we'll catch up because I want to keep in touch with how the Culture Collective is going in particular, because it really interests me, as you know.
Great.
Thank you, everyone. I hope you enjoyed our long chat today. You can find me at scottmedia.uk, or you can go onto Facebook, Fiona Scott's PR Tribe. Just enter your email and you can be part of the group. It's all free. Or you can find me on LinkedIn. Thanks so much for watching, and see you soon.